Honorable Chair, dear colleagues, and dear friends, hope this is the last time that we meet virtually only without being able to hug each other. I'm sure that next year we will have different conditions, face-to-face meeting in Kiev. Let me share with you the results of our study regarding the predictors of the length of stay and mortality for patients with hip fracture. As we all know, incidence of hip fracture as well as fragility fracture-related deaths are really high in Europe. However, there is a huge diversity, so nearly a threefold range of hip fracture incidence among the European countries, from 240 to 730, for example, in female. But generally, we know that it is higher in the north and lower in the southern countries. We can speculate about the reasons for this variation, but evidence shows a clear relationship with the latitude and the socio-economic prosperity. We are also aware about the burden of fractures in Romania. Only fragility fractures cost the €250 million expenses. However, the incidence in Romania of hip fracture is in the lower range of in the lower European range, but the fragility related mortality is much higher than the European average in Romania. So our aim was in this study to evaluate particularities of the Romanian hip fracture cases with three ICD diagnostic codes. And these were the femoral neck fracture, the pertrochanteric and the subtrochanteric femoral fractures, and also to determine variables which are affecting hospital length of stay and variables which are correlating with in-hospital mortality or in-hospital deaths. As materials, we used reported data of all hip fractures in Romania in 2019, which included almost 25,000 individuals, actually all patients in the public hospitals of the 41 counties in Romania. Variables followed by us were age, gender, setting, hospital type, fracture type, treatment procedures, length of stay, and hospital mortality, so in-hospital deaths. We used regression analysis in the majority of our evaluations. Just in a few words, the results. Average age of the patients was 77 years. Equivalent urban-rural distribution was found. The sex ratio was two-thirds were female. However, the sex ratio shifted in favor of women at the age of 65, and of course it increased vertiginously as age advanced. Here we have the table with all variables, and as I mentioned before, the sex distribution, which shifted after 65 in favor of women, and here we have the diagnosis prevalences by age group. The pertrochanteric fracture was the leading diagnosis in all three age groups. So we regressed the length of stay on a number of variables. Out of these variables, only gender and age did not prove to be statistically significant predictors of length of stay. As expected, the type of procedure tended to affect the length of stay the most. Those who underwent hemiarthroplasty, for example, spent almost 3 days more on average in the hospital compared to those who had an internal fixation as procedure. Length of stay was significantly longer also among those who died before being discharged. And those who have been diagnosed with femoral neck fracture are predicted to stay slightly less in hospital. In a next phase, we intended to find out factors that explain the different mortality among patients. The binary logistic regression showed that the type of hospital only has no detectable influence on the chances of that, but there is a significant connection between length of stay and mortality. Less common procedures double the risk of death compared to internal fixation, while hemiarthroplasty was significantly less life-threatening if all other conditions were kept under control. Gender, age, and residence of the patients have significant effects on mortality. So women, villagers, and younger patients have significantly lower chances to die in hospitals following these interventions. And finally, those diagnosed with petroanteric femoral fractures do have considerably higher chances of survival compared to subtraanteric. Let's go to discussions. So incidence of hip fractures was 248 in 100,000 individuals in the age group 50 plus. The age standardized incidence rates of hip fracture in women are about twice as high as in men worldwide. So the 67% of our study population is in line with the values reported by other studies. Regarding setting, incidence of hip fracture seems to follow the rate of urbanization. So higher hip fracture rates in densely populated cities, so in urban areas compared with the rural areas are well known. Probably hard surfaces, lower physical activity, and less sun exposure may contribute to the higher risks in urban areas, and higher socioeconomic prosperity is also a factor. Regarding length of stay, so the average length of stay was about 11 days in our study population. Patients spent more days in hospital if they were treated in a county or in a municipal hospital compared to teaching clinics. And also if living in urban areas, and if they were older, and if they underwent a procedure of hemiarthroplasty, or if they died during the hospitalization. The in-hospital mortality rate was 4.5%. This is higher than the average European mortality. Although postmenopausal women have a higher risk of developing fractures, men tend to have a worse prognosis after a fracture, so their mortality is higher. We found men having 1.7 times more likely to die as women, 1.35 times higher risk for urban patients to die than rural patients. And age, of course, increases the risk each year, adding a 7%, almost 7% risk to die. A diagnosis of petroanteric fracture also increases the mortality risk compared to femoral neck fracture by 1.43. As a conclusion, the type of the procedure, the diagnosis, the hospital type, these three categories, the setting, so urban, rural, and the death, so mortality before discharge, are associated with a longer length of stay. Also, length of stay, gender, setting, diagnosis, and procedure are significant predictors for in-hospital mortality after a hip fracture. Well, this study, I think, highlights the importance of looking at different groups of hip fracture patients when exploring risk factors. So let me these are the references, and let me finish with a joke of hope, and wishing glory and peace to Ukraine, success for this great conference, and see you next year. Thank you.